Your dog's entire body is to be observed, not just one element. Otherwise, you're likely to misinterpret what he is expressing. Hello and welcome to Canine With You, Canine Voices podcast. I'm Ingrid, dog behavior consultant, and today I'm going to tell you about how your dog communicates. If he's close to you, take the opportunity to watch him carefully. If he's not, visualize him in your head. In the meantime, you might soon feel a grudge against me because I'm also going to tell you to visualize other dogs. As a matter of fact, if dogs have a canine language, you also have canine lingo. If you observe a Dachshund with a Newfoundland, you will not communicate in the same way as with another Dachshund. Just like the Newfoundland will not communicate in the same way with the Dachshund as if he's with a Border Collie, or the same Border Collie if he's with a Great Dane. I could go on like this for a long time. But the main reason that each breed has been developed for particular function. Some dogs will communicate more with their nose, others with their eyes, some with their mouth, others with their paws. It's important to take this into account. Your dog's entire body is to be observed, not just one element. Otherwise, you're likely to misinterpret what he is expressing. You may have heard the expression appeasement signal. Personally, I've given up using this expression and prefer signs of communication. Firstly, because appeasement bothers me. There's no guarantee the dog is voluntarily, knowingly emitting signals to appease the individual in front of him or to appease himself. This can be completely physiological reactions. We have it in humans. For example, you hear a sound with a singer whose voice moves you and your hair will stand on hand. You have no control over the fact that your hair stands on hand on your arms. If your dog can communicate through several channels, his body is still his main tool to communicate. We actually add the barking, his voice at various frequencies, which will indicate several emotional states, several intentions. We can also have the olfaction. He will communicate by rubbing his pads after his needs or by urinating. We will have many other possibilities. He will also communicate by touching you with his nose, with his paws. Here I will really focus on his entire body, the voluntary signs as the involuntary ones. All these things must be observed and taken into account as a whole. An individual element is not enough. So if you look at your dog's body language as a whole, it's going to be important to look at how he is relaxed. Does he have a movement that's pretty smooth, or is it pretty rigid? In reality, that can indicate stress as much as it can indicate potential pain that would require a trip to the vet. Let's take a closer look. We'll start with your dog's head. Well, I said your dog, but you're gonna have dogs that have a completely squashed nose, a very long muzzle. You're gonna have dogs with pointed ears, dropping ones, leave that hang on the sides. Dogs that have a lower jaw, shorter than their nose. Others the opposite. All of this will obviously impact their ability to communicate. The position of your dog's head can also be an indicator. Does your dog have his head down? Does he tend to turn his head away when you are staring at him? A low head can also indicate pain, physical discomfort. A dog that has an ill-adjusted harness or an ill-adjusted collar may have his head down without emitting the slightest emotional sign at that very moment. If he turns his head away when you are staring at him, that just is being polite. In canine terms, staring is not very correct. That being said, several studies have been able to bear that when you are staring at your dog and he is staring at you back, if you can see muscular relaxation at all levels on his whole body, whether it's the muscles of his legs, a possible fairly smooth movement, we're going to talk about relaxed corners of his lips too. In fact, at that moment, you are both secreting an attachment hormone. You are in a state of well-being. That being said, it's not because he turns his head away when you are staring at him that is not attached to you. Some breeds tend to be frontal and stare at you automatically, and others tend to be more avoidant. Being stared at and staring is not very polite. It can also lead to great discomfort towards a dog who is not comfortable at first. It can be both a provocation and a threat. Keep that in mind. If your dog turns his head away but keeps his body relaxed, he's nothing but being polite, including when he presents himself in front of other dogs. He can move forward, turn his head, looks elsewhere, continue to move forward while looking at the other dog, turn his head away, etc. Ears. Well, since we have dogs with very different ears, what will be important is to look at the base of the ears, that part that is really the closest to the skull. They have muscles that hold them to move them in all directions in order to reorient the region of a noise. They can move the right independently of the left. The fact that your dog has his ears backwards doesn't necessarily mean that he's afraid. We have dogs, either by individual or by breed, who will have their ears backwards, flattened, while they are enjoying being petted. It's nothing but mechanical. Discomfort in the ears can also make the ear move in a certain direction. What is important is to look at the position of your dog's ears when he is relaxed. A dog that has pointed ears, erected, oriented straight ahead, focuses on the sound that are in front of him. Let's head for his eyes. The eyes, beyond the look itself, will be expressive on two levels in particular. The pupils. The difficulty in looking at the pupils is if your dog turns his back on you. For example, on the walk, or if your dog has dark eyes, dark iris, either because he has a hazel iris or very dark brown, and when the pupil dilates at that moment, it can be complex to be able to observe well if the pupil is dilated. The dilated pupil will not indicate the type of emotion. You can have a very angry dog who will have dilated pupils, just as you can have a dog with an extremely happy to see you again who will have dilated pupils. At that very moment, you are his drug. It just shows you the emotional level. That's a reaction he has no control over. There will also be something called the whale eye. It's quite rare that you can see the white of a dog's eye. However, when it happens, if he shows a moment laziness. You speak to him, he's lying down, but that would mean making an effort to turn his head towards you. He will just turn his eyes. Yes, potentially you can see the white of his eyes at that very moment, just out of laziness. Except that if he is lying down, he is relaxed. If in addition he dares to sigh afterwards, we are not on a dog that shows stress. On the other hand, if his body is low, and in addition he looks with the white of his eyes to the side or upwards, then you can consider that something is making him uncomfortable at the very least, or even frightening him. It will therefore be important at that moment to look at what causes it. Now let's have a look on your dog's mouth. Your dog can have a V-shaped corners of his mouth. If they form a V, or if the skin is rather wrinkled, there's something bothering your dog. It could be pain, it could be an external element, like another dog present, or sound. If on the contrary, your dog has C-shaped corners, then he's very relaxed, he's fine. If your dog is panting, you know that little sound where you wonder if he has just done a marathon. Well, if it's very hot, don't worry, just that it's hot. It's your dog's way of being able to regulate its temperature. Well, don't worry, check anyway that he's being hydrated. If he has just played, run. We are on a physical reaction due to physical effort. Everything is fine, unless the physical effort was short, and that might be the sign of lungs or heart failure. On the other hand, if there's no high temperature, if he has made no significant effort, mentally or physically one, if he has not chewed for a long time, it's a safe bet that your dog is stressed. Something is bothering him. This can happen to a dog who sees his owner go to the door and who anticipates a moment of loneliness and begins to show signs of anxiety. It can also be if in a family there are people arguing. The dog will emit these signs because he's affected by the atmosphere, by the heavy atmosphere. We can also have some drooling. Well, it's important to distinguish. If you put roast chicken in your kitchen and your dog is in your kitchen, yes, he is likely to drool. It's possible. Well, if you put a chocolate fountain, I can also be likely to salivate. It's only a physical reaction. It's not controllable. It's nothing but a reflex. It is stimulated by an external element. If your child ever drops food on the floor and your dog eats it, it's possible that he has salivated, that he is licking his lips. On the other hand, if he makes small licks, really small and fast ones, something is bothering him. He's stressed, rather negative stress. If your dog licks himself up to his nose, if his tongue is long enough to reach his nose, it's not a sign of stress. Your dog is merely wiping the odors to then be able to take new ones. Yawning. Yes, you may have heard that yawning is a sign of stress. Potentially, it can. It can also be a sign that your dog is tired. It can also be a sign that your dog has a digestive issue. That's why it's very important to be able to contextualize each expression of your dog in each moment when it does them. Your dog just ate. He yawns. Your dog just woke up. He stretches and yawns. To remain at the level of your dog's face, on certain individuals, on certain breeds, you can see some folds forming on the forehead. In fact, your dog is in search of understanding. He's analyzing his environment at that moment. Now, Let's take a closer look at the rest of your dog's body. His muscle. The difficulty will be with dogs that have very salient muscles, just as much as with dogs that have such imposing hair that we cannot see their muscles. Why is it important to be able to look at the muscles? Because an angry dog will tend to contract his muscles more. Try it. Come on. Try not to contract your fist. You will observe that your arm muscles are also contracting. It will be the same. A dog that tends to anchor himself will have contracted muscles. It will be the same. A dog that tends to anchor himself will have contracted muscles. So in dogs that already have prominent muscles, it's important to look carefully at the whole body. Does the dog tend to be rooted if a tornado passes? In fact, if the dog is the only one not moving, that tells you that he is actually pushing a lot more on the muscle than usual. The same with dogs that will have very imposing hair. By the way, speaking of hair, we always tend to pay attention to the hair that stands on end on the dog's back. Because we pay attention in case there be danger. Because when there is danger, we see it. It's something quite easy to see compared to the pupils that dilate. Except that in reality, pillow erection is not systematically negative. It just tells us the intensity of the emotion felt at that very moment. I don't know about you, but I heard the voice of a singer and had goosebumps at a hair that stand on hand slightly. And yet I wasn't upset with that singer. Just that her voice, her words made me emotional. Try to visualize it. Your dog's hair that stands on hand sometimes can be linked to something pleasant, like a female around if you have a male. Often we pay more attention to it in case there be some risk. Once we've observed that, we look at how your dog moves. The problem with moving forward leashed dog is that we tend to have them meet face to face, head on. But as I mentioned when they turn the head on is not polite for dogs. You will have dogs. If you have the leash loose or your dog off leash, they will go around, make some detours to be able to go and greet you politely. Their interest is not to see the other dog's face all the time. It's to go sniff his anal gland, his identity card, to go and sniff his rear, not his head specifically. Well, we have breeds that are made like that, where they will be more likely to communicate very head-on, when they will come at you very directly. Or individuals. Some of them can go very straight to the dog's face, but if they move really smoothly, that can be okay. Not all of them are like that. So it's important to be able to observe how your dog communicates or would communicate if he was not on a leash when you walk him, to go at pace and to be able to move him away if possible in the environment. I'm well aware that in some urban environments it can be complicated on sidewalks to put him in place. But you have some dogs who will lie down. And you have some dogs who will lie down, stay somewhere else, wait for the other dog to arrive. Just politeness. Wanting to make him move forward at all costs can go against what he wants to express. Let's continue down your dog's body and head for his tail. Well, if your dog has a tail, yeah, because on that part again, we have made dogs with a very, very wide variety of possibility. We have dogs with corkscrew-shaped tail. We have dogs with very long tails. We have dogs with very low tails, very high tails, very bushy tails, almost naked tails. what's important is to look at the base of the tail, which means the closest part to the continuation of your dog's spine. Because if we take the example of the Akita, its tail is already very high, even if it's relaxed. On the other hand, the whippet will have a pelvis that looks like it's going downwards, and therefore his tail will already be very low. This doesn't mean he's afraid all the time. So it's important to look at both the end of your dog's spine, his back, and the beginning of his tail to see what the position is. And right now, I'll bust a myth. No, a dog who is wagging his tail is not necessarily happy. For a dog, wagging his tail is stimulated by an emotion. There can be various emotions. They can be positive as negative. Several studies have been able to confirm that if your dog has an amplitude more on his right, in this case, the emotion is pretty positive. If the amplitude is more on his left, the emotion can be ambiguous or negative. Doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a disaster. The height of the tail wag, as well as the speed, will be important. We have breeds. We know some individuals, when they are very happy, we no longer have amplitude on the left or on the right. We have a helicopter. It turns and it turns and it turns and it turns and it turns. A dog that doesn't wag his tail is not necessarily a scared or unhappy dog. Just a dog with a neutral emotion at that moment. I also want to speak about your dog's body language when he shows you his belly. I sometimes hear that you have to pin your dog down on his back, except that this position is up to the dog to agree to do it or not. It has two very important meanings. If he takes it voluntarily and all his muscles are very completely, absolutely mellow, if you press with your finger on his muscle and they just bounce, even if he is extremely muscular, actually, you have a dog who's telling you with his body, I trust you, I feel safe, I'm showing you my most vulnerable part in the most vulnerable position possible. Because it will take an effort for your dog to be able to stand up at that moment. So he knows he has nothing to fear from you. On the other hand, if your dog showed this position, whether to you or to someone else, and he stands, it's because in fact at that moment, he's simply showing you the white flag. He's saying, hey, be cool. I don't come for confrontation. Don't get upset. I'm being very vulnerable, so don't hurt me. You're gonna tell me, yeah, but my dog does it with other dogs. Yes, and it has nothing to do with submission. It's just an extreme politeness that some kind of dog will have to signify that they have no desire for fight, for confrontation. Just calm, they just want gentleness. Maybe he can be very dynamic, but he especially doesn't want to be hurt. So I hope that now on you will be able to look at dogs differently. Don't hesitate to look at your dog again, to look at all the dogs you can meet. That way, their communication will no longer hold any secret for you.